Pretty much everything you said has felt true to my heart, except for there's reason to be fearful of God.
Yes.
That I find
Conflicted about.
because God is love. What good is it to be afraid of love? I know people are afraid.
It's different than that. Her statement is, if God is love, why would we be afraid of God?
How would it be useful?
Or how would it be useful to be afraid of God? Well, God, you see, again, this is how we teach it in Sufism. God is the creator, and we say Malik al-Mulk. Malik al-Mulk means the king of the creation. So God has the ultimate power over creation. Now, when you're in love with God, God has no need to reprimand you for anything. In other words, what?
To teach you.
Yeah, God may want to teach you. Like my kids, my daughter, the other day I was taking her up to school. She had my 13-year-old, and she says to me, I can't remember, she said, "I want to go to town tonight. You better take me." And I said, "Is that how you talk to your father?" And she said, "Yes, that's how I talk to my father." And I said, that doesn't work for me. I said, because really the relationship between a child and the father is a very sacred thing, and it needs to have deep respect. And I'm not actually feeling respectful when you ask me that. But she said, but Mom doesn't always take me, and I want to be taken. And I said, but why doesn't your mom always take you? So she came up, we had this kind of discussion about the whole thing. What am I trying to tell you here?
I guess I don't equate fear with
Fear and
respect.
love.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that for you in love, there's no need for fear because you love God.
Right.
But not everybody's in love with God. And there are times that you won't be in love with God. And times all of us, we get to the place where we cross certain lines in ourselves, and we start to turn towards evil. All of us do. It's in human beings. And it's in those moments that we need to have fear of God. Not the moments when we're in love with God, but the moments when the rebellious parts of us come up and, you hurt us, you took my boyfriend away, well, F you, I'm going to do what I want. Now, I don't care what anybody says. In that moment, you might do something really bad. And in that moment, if you have some fear of God, you might not do it. So the fear of God is not for the love of God. The fear of God is when we turn away from God and we start to go into the darkness ourselves. And I promise you that everybody in this room has reached moments of that.
It sounds like what you're saying is it's useful not to be afraid of God, but to be afraid of not having God.
Yes.
Which is different than being afraid of God.
Well,
being afraid of no God.
For me, when I've been on the Sufi path for 20 years, and that day when I reached my limit, of carrying things, because I've been kind of one of the leaders in our Tarika for many years, and a lot of the stuff has fallen on my shoulders. So I was sitting there in front of the prayer room, and I just reached a point, I was just like, I'm tired, God, I don't have energy left in me anymore. I don't want to do it. And it was the first time in maybe 18 years, this was like 4 years ago, that I hit that point on myself. And in that moment, I felt God unhappy with me. Like deep inside, I could feel that God was like, Ibrahim, if you need help, ask for my help. If you need strength, ask for my strength. If you reach hopelessness, ask for hope. Why aren't you turning to me and asking me to help you instead of giving up and throwing in the towel? And I felt it. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew exactly how God felt about it, because I could feel it in my being. And I felt God's displeasure, but God was displeased with me because I wasn't turning to God for help. I was turning away from God because I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to take on one more burden in that moment. See?
I was going to say, so you're really using the fear of God as a check system to know that you're
getting away from God.
It's a check system. It's a check system when you turn away. In that moment, that wasn't much of it. I wasn't turning to evil. I wasn't turning to darkness. I wasn't turning to anything other than just saying what I was turning to was not doing what God wanted me to do. Because I knew what God wanted, which was me to lead and to care and to give until I dropped dead if necessary, meaning to my last breath. And if that was what God wanted from me, then that's what I needed to do. And I knew that God was asking a great deal of me, but I also know that God has given me a great deal. So it was, I didn't feel in any way like it was wrong what God's asked of me, but I just felt like I didn't want to do it anymore. But you see, the point is that because I made that decision, and the outcome of that accident 3 days later, I now have fear of God. Which means that I know in my heart that if I choose not to want to follow God anymore and do what He asks of me, I'll just be taken out of here. There's no need for me to be here anymore. It's over for me. So I have that fear of God in me now. It's not a bad fear. I love God as much as before, but I also have learned to respect God in a way that I didn't have before. So I have a certain type of fear, but it's a fear of really listening to God. It's a fear of really doing what God asks of me, and it's not being willing to give in to my own weakness, which was really my own weakness. It was what was going on. I hit my own place of weakness, and I gave up. So I don't know if it makes any sense, but it's a deep thing. Yes.
When you say that you felt God's displeasure for you, or God was, like, it sounds like almost like an emotion. How do you know whether it's a higher self or it's God, or like God feels like a reality, doesn't feel like it could have an emotion? So could you clarify God and higher self?
Well, I don't know. I mean, higher self. A lot of people talk about higher self. And I think when most people talk about higher self, they're kind of talking about their souls, honestly. And then some people talk about higher self as their God self. And the God self is the part that's resonant with God, right? So I like that term better, myself, than higher self. In Buddhism, they say there's three bodies. There's your lower body and its energy field, and your subtle body and its energy field, which is your soul body, and then your God body and its energy field. So in the Buddhist teachings, Tibetan Buddhism, there's three levels of that God, those aspects. In Sufism, that God relationship with God, which goes into our spiritual self or higher self, we ultimately put God as the ultimate beyond all that, and you're aware of that light inside of you. So you're for me, for example, most of the time I'm always present with that light, and I'm watching it like every second. As I'm talking to you, but believe me, deeper inside of me than talking with you, I'm watching that light, and I've learned over the last 20 years to listen to it, to understand it, to follow it, to obey it, to be merciful from it, with it, to be in the adab with it. So that relationship is more important to me than anything else in the world. Okay? And there are times when that light withdraws from me, and I can actually feel that light pulling away from me. And if the light pulls away from me, it's a sign that I'm doing something wrong. In other words, when that light moves away from me, it's God telling me deep inside that somehow I've crossed some line that God doesn't want. Maybe, it may just be something as simple as I spoke in a way that hurt one of my kids, or I said something that was misunderstood, or those are the most common reasons I find that God pulls away from me these days. It has to do with my speech. I have to be really careful with my speech.
Does it have to do with like the big global picture, like the global consciousness picture, or is it like a reflection of how somewhere inside of ourselves we're feeling in our environment?
You mean the relationship to God?
whether it's right or wrong, you know? Is it something global, or is it something that we...
Can be anything. I mean, depending on your consciousness. Like that when you go into global consciousness, there'll be part of your consciousness that's aware of people all over the globe. When you go into universal consciousness, you're going to be aware of beings over the whole universe. When you go into God consciousness, you're going to be aware of God every second. There are many levels of consciousness that exist. And those levels, if you're in global consciousness, you might feel when a bomb gets, like that chemical warfare got dropped in, the chemicals got dropped in Syria, you would feel that. You would feel that inside your being, because it would be you'd feel the rippling in the force. How else to put it? You feel it moving, you know, in global consciousness. But what God is going to look to you and to all of us is God is going to look at our reaction to that. In other words, if you see something rippling through the consciousness and you go into disdain and you say, well, I don't care, which many people do, what do you think is going to happen from God's perspective to you? God's going to say, my beloved doesn't care about other people. That's what God is going to notice, because God's conscious. God's going to be aware. God's going to say, my beloved doesn't care about other people. And that is going to have an effect on you, because God's going to recognize a place where you don't have mercy in yourself. That sets into motion the teaching of mercy. Meaning, if God sees that you don't have mercy, God will set into motion teachings to teach you mercy. Okay? If God sees that you are selfish, let's say that God puts something in front of you and you choose to be selfish in some way. Like let's say, and for me, I'm just thinking of examples in my life. I had purchased a house in Jackson Hole many, many years ago. And then CD came out and he said, Ibrahim, you have to leave. This is not the place for you. And when we went to leave, we found there was a loophole, essentially, which meant that I could have essentially ripped off the guy I had bought the house for I think it was $30,000 or $40,000. And I remember the realtor came to me and said, oh my God, he said, did you realize this was here? My realtor, you're going to get $30,000, $40,000. Yahoo! You know, and I looked at it and I realized that if I took that for $30,000, $40,000, I was going to rip off the previous owners. It was a rip-off. Even though legally justifiable, it was a rip-off. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, what would God think of me if I ripped this man off? And he was an older man. He was probably in his 70s and, you know, and was, you know, looking at death. And $30,000, $40,000 is a lot of money to him. So I said to my realtor, and the guy came to me, he comes to me crying. He said, oh, Dr. Jaffe, he said, I know it's in there, but $30,000, you know, this is a lot of money to us. We're old, we're not working anymore. Please don't take this from us. You know, and I said to him, you know, and the realtor was saying, you should take it. And, you know, and I said to him, I said, you know what? I said, I have to answer before God. I said, if I took this money from you, I don't know what God would make for me. I don't want to know. I said, if I stole from you, someone's going to steal from me. And I said, I would never do that. And this man started crying. He started crying. He was so thankful that I didn't steal from him when I could have. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I say when you're in the presence of God, you're aware of God's light, and you're aware of the outcomes of your choices. And if you make a choice that causes what I call displeasure of God, meaning that if I had stolen that money, I tell you what would have happened. The light of God would have pulled away from me. There would have been deep displeasure from God because I stole. I would have immediately set me into a teaching where people would have stolen from me, because that's usually how God teaches us through reflection. So somebody would have stolen from me. And on top of that, there would have been what I call the sin of stealing itself, which would have caused my spiritual growth to slow down. In other words, I would have had to deal with essentially that I had done something that God didn't want me to do. So that's why I say this is, you know, as you're in the presence of God, you're learning to watch the light of God itself. And part of the Sufi training is really understanding that relationship inside of yourself. It's a direct relationship inside of yourself. For example, and I'm just trying to give you examples, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But the point is you're learning to have that relationship yourself. Okay? Now you have to develop that because it takes really years to become really solid in that relationship. It's not something that happens in a minute. It happens over a period of years. It takes time to be trained by God, really, ultimately, in that relationship. And how God does it is God gives you choices, and when you choose the wrong choice, God shows you how it was wrong. That's how the training happens. It's an interior training that goes on inside of you. So you want to go on should I choose this person or this person to marry? God wants you to choose the good one, but you want to choose the other one. Right? Why do you choose the other one? Because for some reason they have something you want. This one that actually could love you, you're not choosing. So you choose the other one. God says, okay. God distances a little bit, said, you chose one that's not going to love you. And then now you have to go through the experience of not being loved. And then you go through a year or 2 or 3 years in that marriage and you experience what it's like not to be loved and not to be cared about and not to be honored and not to be respected. And all of a sudden, after some period of time, you realize that that was the wrong relationship for you. And then you're smarter. And the next relationship you get into, you try to find somebody who really loves you. That's how God trains you. Okay, so it's not necessarily, and I probably didn't answer your questions, and I know it's triggering this fear of God thing. It's a big thing that many people have, but it's not to fear God as God is ultimately loving, but God has God's limits. You know, God does have limits. Like if you destroy people, or you kill people, or you do bad things, God can become angry with that. God does not want His jewels to be destroyed. And if you're somebody that doesn't know that, and you do that, and many people do, and you know that, then God will teach those people very strongly. Something comes back. It comes around, goes around, and you learn, don't do that anymore. And that's what fear of God means. Yes.
The word fear is triggering to me too, and I've found that changing the word itself to awe or
Awe of God.
understanding the majesty is much more helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a semantic thing.
Yeah,
Mm.
fear is a triggering word,
Fear
but
is,
being
yeah.
in awe of, and when you think about nature, maybe, and the
You're not afraid of God
inspiring
because
people.
God is bad. Yeah, you're in awe of God, but God does have limits. That's what you have to
I think it's like,
understand.
it's just respecting boundaries or truth or.
Or even nature. You know, nature is God, right? If we disrespect nature, what happens? You know, we end up with storms, we end up with, you
It's
know,
acknowledging karma.
karma. Exactly, it's a rule of God. What you
Yeah.
do goes around, comes around. That's God. Where it comes from. Yes.
So can anger actually be seen more as karma versus an emotion that goes through, that happens through God?
Well, no, because karma, people say karma goes around, comes around. It's a Buddhist understanding. What you do comes back to you. But what's not addressed is where did karma come from?
So God can feel?
So God can teach you. Karma is God's way of teaching you.
How does God get angry? I don't see that. I don't feel that.
All right. God is harmony. God is peace. God is love. God is beauty. God is the universe in perfect harmony with itself. Okay? And it is. If you look, our sun has been up there for God, how many millions of years, and our earth has been traveling around that sun for how many millions of years, and we're still in perfect harmony with each other, right? God's is better than Swiss clockmakers. You know, all right? And what happens is God created something called human beings. And he said, human beings, I'm going to give you this special gift that's called free will. Which means that if you want to destroy my harmony, you can. So I'm going to give you a child, and I'm going to give you a perfect 9 months to make this baby. And I'm going to give you a perfect baby. But you want to start drinking alcohol while you have that baby in your belly, you may have microencephalopathy. You want to start taking cocaine while you got that baby in your belly, you don't know what you're going to do with that child. You have free will, you can do what you want. That baby is going to be perfect. But you start taking drugs while you have that baby, you're going to damage that child. But you have the free will to do that. I give you free will, but I'm telling you that if you do it, I'm not going to be happy about it. I don't want you doing that. I want you to respect that you're pregnant. I want you to respect that you have a child inside of you. And I want you to care for it. That's how God works. I give you free will, I give you holiness, but I also give you the ability to do anything you want.
I think it was that I was feeling into myself or my own energy when I get angry, and I was projecting it onto God, and that didn't make sense. So maybe there is a divine anger, but I don't know of it. I don't have that wisdom yet.
I'm sure that there's times that you get angry that are really from God. Yeah, like many times, we say there's white anger, red anger, and black anger. When you see injustice and you get angry about it, that's God's anger. When you see injustice and you get, that's what we call white anger. You're angry because there's injustice going on and you're mad about it. That's God's anger. I'm sure you have that, right? Okay, so I know we've covered a lot of ground today. You know, to close up, just, you know, the whole key of Sufism is this relationship to God. And it's the key to the whole thing, is to know what the light of God is, to know what the will of God is, and to love God and love God's will and ultimately surrender to it. That's the primary teaching of Sufism. And then learning to, as time unfolds itself, to know when, through our free will, we violate that holiness and how to get back to it. Yes?
To me, what brings up the picture, if we have our relationship with God, we're in Noah's Ark.
That's true. In fact, Siddhi said that he called it the Ark of Safety. He said that's exactly what was used, the same words as you did. That's true. All right, so we're going to take a break. This afternoon, we're going to be looking at some deeper teachings. We're going to go into some of the soul teachings. This is a more advanced afternoon. You're all welcome to come. We're going to be looking at the walking of the third station. The third station is called Nafs al-Muhammad. It's the station of how the soul has to purify itself in order to come into the state of unity or enlightenment or fana. And we're going to discuss the purification of the soul and what's needed to reach the state of unity and how that happens at the soul perspective. That'll be this afternoon, and we'll do a little bit of spiritual healing as well. Okay.